the same language clan, sort of like Yiddish and Hebrew today. Yiddish is a degenerate Hebrew, Aramaic and Hebrew are in that same family. A person that handled one could handle the other, at least basically. It's about as much difference between them as there is between Portuguese and Spanish. Any person that speaks Portuguese can understand a Spaniard. A Spaniard can, with great effort, understand about 85% of what a Portuguese says. The Portuguese language is much more the developed language. Hebrew was a much nicer language than Aramaic. Aramaic was more of a low-level type of language. Okay? And like I say, the Aramaic passages in the Old Testament, the biggest chunk is that one in Daniel, from Daniel, 1 through 7. That's the biggest chunk of Aramaic in the Bible. Outside of that, there's maybe a word here or there. All right? Now, I'm going to pass out that. I'm not going to pass out. I'm going to pass this out. All right? All right. This is the chart that you got last week, only now it's complete. And we are hopefully within 1 or 2 weeks of giving you the whole book. So don't get snowed by all these pages. When we're done, you'll have a copy of the whole thing, bound up like the ones that you saw from last year. And it won't take a year. They'll be done before we're done. All right? Look at this chart. Open it up. And those of you that have a real good memory or last week's notes in front of you, you got this page last week. But I've added on to it. And I would like to draw your attention to some of this history before we begin, just so you get an idea of it. Now, if you can see mine, I color it in yellow. Starting from around the fall of Jerusalem, turn the paper up like this. Look at the line on the right-hand side. You see where it says 586 Jerusalem falls? See that? Right about there, about 4 inches down. Okay? Now, put a line or something there. You can mark on this because you're going to get another one. You'll have a nice clean one, so scribble on this one if you want. Mark a line about where Jerusalem falls, and then count down the names of the kings until you see 521 to 485, Darius 1. See that? Yeah. Okay. That's the period of Daniel. That's the time Daniel lived. Somewhere in there. Now, let's assume that he lived on into Darius' reign. We don't know that he passed Darius. But if he lived on a little bit into Darius' reign, and if he was a young teenager when Jerusalem fell, that would mean that Daniel would have lived somewhere from around 610, 600 BC, down, let's say, to about 500 BC, would have made Daniel about 100 years old. And for that period of time, that would be a ripe old age. Okay? So if he lived from about the time that Nebuchadnezzar took over from the Assyrians, and he lived down into the time of Darius, would have taken 100 years. All right, now drop your eyes down on this, where it splits into 4, just below the fold of the page. Okay? In the second column of them from the right, it starts with Seleucus. Seleucus, see it? Look down to 175, and you'll see Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus IV. That's the guy Daniel does all the prophesying about 300 years later. See? Every time I talk about Antiochus, that's the Antiochus Daniel is writing about. That's where the prophecy gets fulfilled. And that's about 300 years from the time of Daniel. If you back up, you'll see Alexander. Just above Alexandria, built in 332, you'll see Alexander. Alexander, from Alexander's birth to the time where that divides into 4, that's the second most prophesied period of time in Daniel. So when you look at Daniel's prophecy on here, it starts really from Alexander and runs down to Antiochus. And that's from 150 to 300 years later than Daniel. So it isn't just guesswork. All right? That's why the historians want to try and move Daniel to a later date and say he wrote history instead of giving him the early date and say he wrote prophecy. Now, to give you an idea of some of the things that happened that are relative to Daniel, if you will look at the very center of the page where it says the Parthenon, you saw pictures of the Parthenon that I showed you in church on Sunday evening. Remember that when we came back and I showed you some pictures of the Parthenon? Right here in the center. See where my finger is? Right in the center. It says 497. Parthenon built. Okay? Daniel probably died just about that time. The Parthenon that we visited that now lies in ruins was built about the time Daniel died. Okay? Another marker, about 15 to 20 years after Daniel died, you have the death of Gautama Buddha, who was 80 years old when he died. So Buddha and Daniel were contemporaries. At least there was a 50-year overlap minimum between Gautama Buddha and Daniel. Okay? Now move down to the next one. Who's Hippocrates? Yeah. Remember, a medical man takes an oath. What's it called? The Hippocratic Oath. It's Hippocrates, and he's the one that wrote out that oath that doctors still take. Hippocrates lived in 420, or died in 420. And 399 is a name you will recognize. Socrates. That was the time when he died. All right? So you get an idea of Socrates' time. Socrates died. Aristotle replaces him as the chief teacher, and Aristotle becomes the teacher of Alexander the Great. What I'm giving you are some historical pegs on a sheet that you can look at. Okay? When you get over here, farther to the left, you now begin to see the development of the Roman Empire, and I took the Roman Empire down past the time of the Lord Jesus Christ. The great persecutions of the Roman Empire were under Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero. Those were horrible days for the Christians back in that day. Nero was the one that put Christians on a stake and then covered them with tar up to their head and then lit them on fire and used them for streetlights and for garden parties. Would you like to have been a Christian in Rome back then, right? He's the guy that said to the lions with the Christians, and they would take Christians and they put them into, totally unarmed, put them into an arena with animals that had been kept hungry and turn the animals loose. And the people would sit up there and they would watch the lions and the Christians instead of the lions and the bears. I'm not so sure it was much less violent, but or more violent, but that was their afternoon entertainment. You know, how many of you watched at least a part of one of the ball games today? If you lived in Rome in the days of Nero, no football, you went to the Colosseum and watched the Christians and the lions tangle and watched the gladiators fight. Now you've seen probably on TV movies of the gladiators, right? That's the time. Right around Nero, Caligula, that's when the gladiators were fighting in the arenas. And that's when the Christians were being burned and all of that kind of good stuff. So you get a little idea. I don't know if this helps or not, but this takes you through all of these great world empires. Starts up here with Assyria, which is replaced by Babylon, which is replaced by Medo-Persia, which is replaced by Greece, which is replaced by these four, and gradually, one by one, Rome knocks each of the three of the four off, and that's it. Now, if you want to see, I don't know how many of you collect these? Did you know there's an index to them? How many of you knew there's an index volume? It costs you $13.95 to get an index volume that will index everything from 1947 through 1984. Okay? So if you really want to make your National Geographic usable, next time you get an ad from National Geographic for that on there, order it. It's really a great index. I looked up these times, and here is a whole issue. January 1968, the whole issue is on Alexander the Great. And the red lines are Alexander's campaign, and remember, he did it without airplanes, without anything on wheels except some chariots, perhaps, mostly on horseback. He was all over those red lines. And if you take a look at it, Bill, there's a lot of them, aren't there? Yes, in less than 10 years. But most of it happened in less than 3. The first 7 years he was consolidating Greece. The first 7 years he was getting rid of the Persian yoke in Turkey, and then he started this lightning campaign that carried him all over the world. It's an incredible story. This is an excellent article, by the way, if you want to read about Alexander the Great. It is an excellent article.
Were most of these great kingdoms before the time of Christ? Were there any great kingdoms after the time?
Oh, yes. I'll mention a few. A lot of Rome lasted after. And Rome was replaced by the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire, the Germans and Franks. And they lasted until you ran into things like the Italians, the Spanish, the British. I want you to consider the British Empire run by that little island called England. Included South Africa, India, Australia, Canada, the starting of our country, British Guiana, New Zealand, half of Europe, And that was a sneaky little kingdom, it's just a little island off of the main body of Europe. So there have been giant empires, and probably right now, if you had to name a giant empire, what one would you name? Russia, absolutely. Only it's not called the Russian Empire, it's called the Communist world, or the Red Bloc, or the Communist Bloc. But for all intents and purposes, who says how high they all jump? If the Yugoslavians don't jump high enough, in come the tanks. If the Polish start rebelling, in come the tanks. And the Hungarians, we're familiar with that one, right? There was an invasion of Hungary. And Afghanistan didn't jump through the hoop. So what do? Roll into Afghanistan. You either jump through the hoop or you're in trouble. That doesn't differ very much from Nero, does it? Or from Babylon or Medo-Persia. The whole thing that Daniel is seeing, if you were Daniel, how would you like to sit there and see the lion, Babylon, which was vicious and all the rest, replaced by the bear, Medo-Persia? And then just about the time everything seems to normalize, along comes the leopard, Greece. And then comes this beast that utterly defies description. You can't put an animal on it. He just describes it as a terrifying beast. And now I'm down to Rome. And what Daniel is seeing is a succession of fundamentally evil empires that are going to rule over the face of the earth. During that whole time, his people are going to be under the stress and strain of being captive to one another. How would you feel if you were Daniel, John? Not so hot. So every once in a while, in comes a word, a message about the Ancient of Days. Or in comes a word that says the throne is set. Or in comes a word that says the kingdom will be destroyed by a rock, a kingdom that falls out of the heavens, or comes out of the heavens and fills the whole earth. Because what is God telling Daniel in spite of all of what he sees? There's born a ray, yeah, there's hope. There's a big ray of hope.
Why all the symbolism? Why not name the countries? Why do we get something we have to work so hard at?
Well, some of it's interpreted so that you don't have to work hard at it. The angel does some of that. We'll see that a little later this evening.
God certainly knew what he was referring to.
Sure. But God also used the nature. When God gave us the Word of God, He did something very unique. He took Bruce. You're not going to pour oil on people tonight, Bruce. I'm going to make you a prophet tonight. He took Bruce and he said, I'm going to communicate this book through Bruce. But Bruce is living in the United States. He speaks with a certain idiom. Not even just idiom of the United States, but he speaks with an idiom that belongs to the north central part of the United States. If you had a very closely attuned ear and you lived in another part of the country, and Bruce came to you, you'd probably say to him, oh, you must come from the Dakotas or Minnesota. Why? Because of the sound. People tell me that I spent some years on the East Coast, because there are some words that I say that still carry that. When I was out on the East Coast, they said, you sound like a Midwesterner. And there are still some of you that tell my wife every once in a while she sounds like a Southerner, especially after she talks with her sister on the telephone. The kids always used to tell her, Mom, you've been talking to Aunt Faye again because you all are talking like that again. And it's true, see? Now, God takes Bruce and he wants to convey a message to Bruce for his people. But his people don't speak like Germans. Germans are marvelous people, John. German says, jump in a lake. The other guy goes and does it. He means jump in a lake. They cannot speak. The German language has a hard time speaking like that in picture speech. If it says, this guy told that guy to go jump in a lake, he thinks he meant literally, put on a swimming suit, go dive off. Okay? The Easterner speaks in, he never tells you exactly what John's mind. My prime illustration of that is, I have a granddaughter, and your son wants to marry my granddaughter. It would be about the right age. Your son wants to marry my granddaughter, and you would come to me and you would say something really like very similar to this. My thorn bush would love to stand in the shade of your rose tree. And I would know exactly what you were talking about. But poor Bruce over here, he comes from the United States. And he sits there and he says, why don't those two guys ever say what they mean? If you ever have a chance to go to the Middle East, if you ever have a chance to go to Israel, go! Don't even think twice about it. I found it incredibly interesting. It was exciting. I didn't get thump religious, okay? But I saw things that helped me understand things about the Word of God. Now, let's take
Tim, who's the salesman here. Well, I think he's got a higher rank than that now. But anyway, let's take Tim and let's put him in a shop over in the old quarter, the Arab quarter of Jerusalem. And Earl is out shopping and he wants to buy his wife a present to take back after his trip. So he comes in to him and he says to him, I am looking for, and he tells him what he wants. Have you got one? And Tim says, oh, I got the best one that was ever made. I got such a good one, you'll never see such a good one in your whole life. Solid, 100% handmade, perfect, new stuff. How much you want for it? Oh, I give it to you cheap, $100. Now, if Earl opens his wallet up and gives Tim $100 for this homemade product, he is going to come home and find out that he could have bought it in a department store. It's been made on a machine, and he could have bought it for $35. Why does Tim tell him handmade for $100? Because he can't tell him it's machine made and it's $35. That's not the way they do things. They don't shop like that. They don't go to Penny's and pay the price. They don't go to Dayton's and pay the price. They bargain. Now, Earl knows this, so Earl says, listen here, I see better stuff than that in the dime store back home. $100. I'll give you 10. And then Tim goes into his act again. $10 for a handmade, 100% wool, 100% silk, whatever it is. Handmade, you want to give me $10? This is terrible. You want to kill me. You want to take my life. You want me to die. $75. And then Earl says, oh, no way would I give you $75. Look, there's a flaw right here in this thing. The coloring is off. $20. And then Tim goes back into his act again. And then Earl goes back into his act again. And then Tim goes back into his act again. And then Earl gets smart. He says, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do business in this store. And he walks out. And Tim comes out carrying this item right down the street. And he says, wait a minute, I make you a deal. Don't go over there. I give you a better deal than he does. If you think I'm kidding, you should have been shopping with us in the bazaar. That's not kidding. That's exactly the way it does. When Earl takes out his wallet and he pays Tim $100, Tim is savvy. He doesn't want $100. You know what he wants? He wants the bargain. He wants the bargain. And when he pays him the $100, he said, that stupid American, we did it again. And he goes out and buys a whole month's worth of stock to sell to the next batch of tourists. You can find enough handmade gamals. What does it sound like? A gamal. What does it sound like?
Blanket.
Huh?
A blanket.
A blanket? Gamal. It's an animal. Gamal.
Camel.
Camel, okay? You can buy handmade gamals on any street in Jerusalem, anytime you want. 4 for $1, 5 for $1, $3, depending on the size. All made out of olive wood. All hand carved. They've got the most exactly the same hand carving you ever saw in your life. Now I'll tell you what they mean by hand carving. They mean that originally Sheldon carved one. Originally, Sheldon carved that first 7-inch gamal. He did a nice job. He brought it to Marv, the manufacturer. And Marv took Sheldon's hand-carved one, and he set it up on a laser carving machine, and the laser carving machine duplicates his hand-carved mark. So they are now all hand-carved because they are an exact duplication. And then he puts it on a shrinker machine and cuts it down to a 3-inch gamal, and he blows it up to a 10-inch gamal. And all of these gamals, 3, 5, 7, 9, 12, they all got the cuts in exactly the same place. And they're all handmade because they all came off of Sheldon original. That's handmade in Jerusalem. When you go, you need a tour guide. I'll be glad to take you. Now, that's why, John. Because they don't ever talk like that. And God used Bruce, his language, his culture, his thought patterns, and while God used Bruce to convey what God wanted to convey, he never violates Bruce. So, if he uses a Hebrew writer, what's it going to sound like? And he gamals. Okay? Does that answer your question? Long ways around about.
Yeah.
God could have done it some other way, but it was written in Hebrew for Hebrews. We have been incorporated by the grace of God. So for us, it's a little harder work.
When God gave the vision to Daniel and all these weird beasts, he did the same thing.
Sure, because that's the way they thought. And that's the kind of pictures. If you went to the Besaitan Cliff spelled like so. Oop, not that one. This one. Spelled like so. There is a cliff outside of Babylon called the Besaitan Cliff. Okay? If you went to the Besaitan Cliff and you read the historical records that are on the Besaitan Cliff, you would find that if there was a reference to the Greeks, you know what they would look like? They would look like a goat with one horn. What would we call it? Unicorn. And in Daniel's vision, where you have the ram and the goat, Daniel 8 facing each other, which one is Greece? The goat. So the Babylonians likened them to a goat. The Assyrians likened them to a goat. And God used what they used because they would understand it. It was very universal. One of the symbols of Babylon was a lion with wings. So when you get the first symbol of the animal for Babylon, it is a lion with wings. Okay? I suppose that's hard for us because we like to think we're the most important people in the world and everything is written for us. But that's not the case. When we look back, we understand the Old Testament in the light of our times. And we're not Hebrews. And to learn to think like a Hebrew, that is one of the things that really excited me about going to Jerusalem and to Palestine. I saw some of the things that helped me understand some of the culture patterns in here. And to understand when they say going up to Jerusalem, what they meant. They went up to Jerusalem from just about anywhere because no matter where they came from, before they could get to Jerusalem, they had to climb a hill. Even if they lived in the mountains, they had to go down through the Jordan Valley to get to the Jordan Valley, or from the plain of Sharon to Jerusalem. Guess what you have to do? Go up the hill. So you always go up to Jerusalem. Always. I didn't know that. There are a lot of other things I didn't know. How many of you thought that the old city of David and Jerusalem are one and the same? Let's see. Be honest. City of David and Jerusalem are the same. They're not?
Well, there is a contradiction there. Jesus is born in the city of David, and that was Bethlehem. But Jerusalem, that little corner of Jerusalem, it was Zion, that was the city of David also.
Yes. And that's not our Jerusalem. That's outside of Jerusalem. It's on the hillside, outside of Jerusalem. You have to drive away from the Temple Mount. You have to drive away from Jerusalem proper and get to that old city of David. Not Bethlehem, the other one. It's not Jerusalem.
Why did they call Bethlehem the city of David?
Because he was born in originally. That's his birthplace. Okay. At the risk of boring you to death, I want to read to you a little bit from the apocryphal books. This is 1 Maccabees. This is the Maccabean account of Antiochus, so that you can compare it with your thinking with Daniel. Here's just a little bit. After Antiochus had smitten Egypt, he returned again in the 143rd year. That's the 143rd year of that Seleucid Empire. That's this one here, the third one with all the names on it. Okay? In the 143rd year of the Seleucid Empire, he returned again to... went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude. He entered proudly into the sanctuary, took away the golden altar, the candlestick of light, and all the vessels, the table of showbread, the pouring vessels, the vials, the censers of gold, the veil, the crowns, the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off. He took also the silver and the gold and the precious vessel. He took the hidden treasures which he found. When he had taken all away, he went into his own land and he made a great massacre. And speaking very proudly, Daniel said he would be very proud. Remember, Daniel wrote 300 years beforehand. Therefore there was great mourning in Israel in every place where they were, so that the princes and elders mourned, the virgins and young men were made feeble. Beauty of women was changed. Every bridegroom took up lamentation. A little later he says, moreover, Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and that everyone should leave his laws, so all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. According to Daniel, he was going to try to change laws. His rule was that all religions were now folded up, all laws were now folded up, and his rule and religion would occupy everyone. Here's the key passage that really blew the Jewish mind. On the 520th day of the month, they did sacrifice upon the idol altar that was at the altar of God. And what they sacrificed was a pig. He had torn down most of the building, built out of some of the blocks, bricks of the temple, a heathen altar, and sacrificed the pig on the 25th day of the month called Kislev. That's the equivalent of guess which month of ours? December. Antiochus offered the pig on the altar in Jerusalem on Christmas Day. And Antiochus died on Easter. Approximately. Isn't that an interesting tie-in to the Lord Jesus Christ? He died approximately at Easter time. Now, here's a record of Antiochus' death. This is the 6th chapter. When the king heard these words, he was astonished and sore moved, whereupon he lay down upon his bed and fell sick for grief, because it had not befallen him as he looked for. In other words, he had some hopes, and they didn't materialize. There he continued for many days, and his grief got worse and worse, and he made account that he should die. Wherefore he called all his friends and said to them, the sleep is gone from my eyes, my heart fails for concern. And I thought with myself, into what tribulation am I come, and how great a flood of misery it is, wherein I now am. For I was bountiful and beloved in my power. He wasn't either, he was hate and fear. But he thought he was bountiful and beloved. Okay? But now I remember the evils that I did at Jerusalem, and that I took all the vessels of gold and silver that were there, and sent to destroy the inhabitants of Judea without a cause. I perceive therefore that for this cause these troubles are come upon me, and behold, I perish through great grief in a strange land. So King Antiochus died there in the 149th year of his life. You know what it was that caused the problem? He had attacked another city with a temple for their son and gotten beaten. And the Jewish advisors that were working with him told him the reason that he got beaten there is that he had desecrated a temple down in Jerusalem. He went into such a fit of depression that he died from depression. He did not die because he was slain. Alexander's father, Philip of Macedon, died because one of his sons cut him with a knife. This guy died because he became depressed. Nobody loved him, everybody hated him, he was going to go eat some worms and decided that he lost the war. And he died. And Daniel says he's going to die suddenly at the height of his power, but not by man's hand. Was Daniel right or wrong? Daniel was right, wasn't he? Now, here's another book. Some of these you probably wouldn't go out and buy. This one I think retails at $30. Okay? This is an encyclopedia of archaeology. It has some interesting things. For example, on this map, this is the part of the world that you see on a Bible map. Okay? Here's Palestine down in here. Here's the island of Crete. Okay? The things that are outlined in red is the empire of the Medes and the Persians. Look how big it was. It reached all the way from Turkey all the way over to India. It was no little empire, was it? So when you read about Darius the Mede, you're talking about somebody who rules over a very large portion of the known earth. I'm going to hand that back. You can see it back there. Don't get stuck looking at the pictures in there. You'll be there all night. Because there's some really excellent pictures in there. Now turn to Daniel, please. Here are the notes from tonight's study. Okay. These nations are they're pictured like animals because sometimes we behave like animals. If you would study the life of elephants, tonight we will make Baki an old bull elephant. Baki has led the herd for a lot of years. And a new young bull comes on the scene who wishes to challenge Baki for the power. Here comes Kenneth. Kenneth is the young bull elephant. Kenneth and Baki start going to war with each other until either Kenneth kills Baki or Baki so wounds Kenneth that he has no claim at all anymore to the herd. No female elephants will follow him. He goes off into the woods by himself or into the jungle by himself. He now becomes the one thing that's feared. Whenever you've heard a story about India or Africa, you hear about a certain kind of elephant that everybody feared. What was it? A rogue. He becomes a rogue. Okay? He's had his chance and lost it. But if he succeeds, he probably will finish Baki off because Baki's been leading the herd for a long, long time. And he hasn't the energy to go out and become a rogue. When he gets beaten, the young bull kills him. That's the way these empires work. Here were the Assyrians. They were standing in place. They looked invincible. When the Babylonians came up, they just simply gutted the Assyrian Empire and assimilated it. When the Medes and Persians rose, they had to wipe out the whole line of Darius and Cyrus and Xerxes. They had to wipe out those lines because as long as those people were around, they were a threat. See? They could recall their people, so they wiped them out. And then the Greeks took care of the Medes and the Persians because the Greeks wanted to avenge what the Medes and the Persians had done to them in Turkey before. They had taken Turkey away from the Greeks. Now Alexander wants to get even, so he chooses to. If you will look at the, let's see, the third page of the notes I just gave you, okay, number 3, some additional notes. I got 2 people asking me about the chronology of Babylon. Here it is, about the middle of the page under additional notes, verse 1. Here's the chronology. The first emperor of Babylon was called Nabopolassar. He reigned from 625 to 605 BC. Then came the name that we are most familiar with, Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar reigned from 605 to 561. It's a long time for a man to be on a throne, back in those days. When Nebuchadnezzar died, there was a fight over his throne. The first successor was a man called Evil-Merodach. He's mentioned in the Word of God in 2 Kings 25, 27 to 30, and Jeremiah 52. Not evil because he was bad, wicked. Evil meant man. Merodach the man. Okay? It's Babylonian. And then he only lived about 2.5 years as emperor. He's succeeded by a man who is related like a cousin. His name is Nergal-Sharezer, or something like that. He lasts about 2.5 years, and now comes back to the line of Nebuchadnezzar, and you get Nabonidus. All right? Nabonidus assumes the throne in 555, and he reigns for about 17 years. Nabonidus prided himself on being a scholar. So Nabonidus says, I'm going to be a scholar king. And Jim is Nabonidus, and Jim says, I'm going to be a scholar king. I don't like all this political nonsense. I just don't like it at all. So he says, okay, I'm going to appoint one of my boys to rule over Persia, in that area, and that'll be Bill. And that's Belshazzar, the Belshazzar of Daniel. I'm going to appoint my other boy, that's Ray, only Ray's name in this case is going to be Nabonidus too. And he appoints him over Haran. Who came from Haran? Yeah, Rebecca, Abraham's family, right? Okay, so you get, see the biblical connections? Everywhere you go, you run into these names, don't you? Haran is up there around Syria and up in the Turkey area and ruled that part of it. So he divided his empire here. Divided his empire right about there. Said this side Haran, so that's Nabonidus too. This side Belshazzar. Then he said, oh, I better do something about this part down here, Arabia. So while one is ruling here and one is ruling here, he, the scholar, goes out to make war. And he makes war against Arabia. It was while he was on that campaign in Arabia that the Medes and the Persians came and overthrew the city, overthrew Babylon. Now, Jim had a good question. He looked at the encyclopedia, and things didn't come out quite like that. Because you've got this problem in the encyclopedia and in the book of Daniel that says that Belshazzar is the son of Nebuchadnezzar. You must understand Hebrew thinking again. Okay? John is my father's son in Hebrew thinking. He is also my father's grandfather's son. Because in Hebrew, Babylonian thinking, anybody down the line claims any male ancestor up the line is father. When the Lord Jesus Christ walked the face of the earth, he said, you are of your father, the devil, and they said, we are of our father. How long before then did Abraham live? How many? Quite a few. 2,500. 2,500. But they said, we are of our father, Abraham. And here's how they think of it. Okay? Somewhere down the line, I may not be around, but I will have a great-great-great-great-grandchild, unless the Lord comes back and, you know, all of those other good things happen. But otherwise, in the normal course of things, I will have such a person. That person will have me inside of them genetically. Right now, that person is inside of me because it's going to be transmitted down from seed to seed to seed, right? That's how come Levi could pay tithes to to Melchizedek, even though Levi is not going to be born for about 200 years. Because Levi was in Abraham when Abraham paid the tithes. See? That's biblical thinking. That's Eastern thinking. So when it says Nebuchadnezzar is his father, it doesn't necessarily mean it's Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. It means it's Nebuchadnezzar, Nabopolassar, Belshazzar. Okay? And for them, that's no problem. And it isn't incorrect, because even if you think about it a little bit, genetically, that is correct, isn't it? Genetically, you couldn't have had Belshazzar unless Nebuchadnezzar was in the line. Because Nebuchadnezzar was the ruling king, and he passed it through Nabonidus and passed it on. Everybody with me? Anyway, I don't want you to walk away feeling like you got snowed, but I don't think that you can come to this book of Daniel without seeing some of these things and grasping what's going on around them and why it's pertinent there. Okay, the next thing down is the walls of Babylon. I thought as I gave you the description last week, I better give you a little more. So I went through this book particularly, which is entirely on Babylon. Very interesting. Somebody wants to read it after we're all done, I'll be glad to let you read it. It's not bedtime reading, it's not easy reading, but it's nice. I mean, it tells you the story of Babylon. It's pretty good. It's written by a lady by the name of Joan Oates. Here's the description of the wall. The outer wall first. The outer wall had 3 sections. The inner section of the outer wall was 7 meters thick, and it was made of mud brick. It had a 12-meter space between it and the second section. In other words, you got 7 meters of mud brick wall. Then you got 12 meters that was originally space. They filled it up with dirt. So now I've got 19 meters, right? The next section, the middle section, is 7 to 8 meters thick, and it's baked brick. Now I'm up to 26 or 27 meters. And the outer section is 3 meters, made of baked brick, and it's right up tight against the middle section. I now have a wall 30 meters wide.
How much is it deep?
39 inches? Boy, you were going to be precise here. So we're talking about 30 meters at 30.7 inches. How much are we talking? 100 feet? Yeah, close to 100 feet.
The other historians say 87 feet, so that's pretty close.
I won't argue for that. They may, you know what they may have done? They may have taken out the 12 in the middle. All right? Now the inner wall, first of all, between the walls there's a space. The space is 30 meters, 50 meters, and a moat. There was a moat. They channeled the river all the way around the city, both sides. They just turned it so that below the inner wall there's a moat. I don't know the width of the thing, but the whole space, moated space, is 50 meters. Which means I've got my approximately 100-foot wall, and then I've got approximately 170 feet of space in between with the moat. Then I get to the outer wall. And the outer wall had the inner wall. The inner wall had 2 sections. The inside section was 6.5 meters thick, and it was made of mud brick. There was a 7-meter space between the 2 walls, which was never filled but used as a road, sort of like a bypass. If you wanted to go around the city of Babylon, you got into the outer wall, the inner wall, and that inner space between the 2 layers of the inner wall, and you could have unobstructed chariot race all the way around town, except till you got to the river and you had a little bit of a problem. Okay? Then there was an outer section that was 4 meters thick, and that was made of mud brick. So the inner section totaled up to 17.5 or 18 meters. So the inner wall is about 60 feet wide. Then you got about 160 feet with the moat next to the inner wall. And then you've got a wall of 100 feet wide. And all that went completely around the city. And the square area of the city of Babylon, remember last week, is the equivalent of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Roseville. That's exactly. Those 3 areas are exactly the same size as this capital, and it's around this that all that wall was built.
How would it take a judgment?
We don't know how. Hard to guess. Over the river, they put iron bars that went down into the water. Now, remember how I described how safe they felt? How do you feel if you lived inside that kind of a defense? Oh, don't forget the towers and the boiling oil and the arrows and all that other business, because that was there too. But you're just talking about the basic wall. Outer wall completely filled, 100 feet wide. How wide is an automobile? 6 feet, 10? That close? 5.5?
I can't sleep on one side of it, can I? Must be 5.5.
lengthwise.
You could in the trunk of my old Plymouth, I think. But I'm not inside the car because of the inner walls. Maybe 5.5, 6 feet? How many Cadillacs could I put on the top of the outer wall of Babylon? 16 or 17, right? Yep. Side by side, on top of the wall.
You want to go to high or two?
I didn't find the data on how high, except that I happen to remember back from someplace, Charles, that the inner wall was 70 feet and the outer wall was 50. High.
I wonder where they got all the dirt from. They must have a big hole someplace.
They had a lot of kings. Must have a lot of dirt on those kings, huh? Okay? Look at Daniel 8, verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar, the king, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, subsequent to the one which had appeared to me previously, verse chapter 7. I looked at the vision and came about while I was looking that I was in the citadel of Susa. Okay? What's a citadel? Yeah, the fortress. He was inside the walls. Now remember, where was Daniel living? No? Babylon. Where is Susa? What's Susa?
Capital city.
Of Persia. Okay? So he's living there, but God in the vision takes him over and puts him into the capital city of Persia. Sort of like John. Remember in the book of Revelation? He's on the earth, but he gets transported up into the heavenlies to see his visions. Right? Daniel is moved over to Persia, okay? Which is in the province of Elam. And I looked at the vision, and I myself was beside the Ulai Canal. Now he identifies that I was on this certain side of the city, which if I remember correctly, the Ulai side, there's a river that splits in two and goes around the city of Susa. And one side is called Ulai and one side is called the other. And I think the Ulai side is the southwest side. The other one goes on more towards the north and east. Okay? So he's on that side of it. And then he begins to look and he sees a ram that had 2 horns. And it was standing in front of the canal. And the 2 horns were long, but one was longer than the other, with the longer one coming up last. One horn is the Medes, one horn is the Persians. We call it the Medo-Persian Empire because historically, which one came first? The Medes, which was then the longer horn. The Persians, because they came last and took over. Remember the bear raised up on one side lower on the bear than the other because one side had fallen and the other was usurping the chief place. So the bear is tipped, the horn one is longer, right? Okay, now let's go on. And I saw the ram budding westward and northward and southward, and no beast could stand in its way. Page 4, on verse 4. Pushing west. Babylon and Asia Minor were captured by Cyrus. That's west. Pushing south. Egypt and Libya, only they should have wiped them out, we wouldn't have Gaddafi, were captured by Cambyses. Then he pushed north, Scythia, and both Cyrus and Darius pushed that way. But the Medes and the Persians never went to India and China. That would have been east. They never did. Daniel wrote this before Medo-Persia was a power. And he wrote and said it would push east and west and west and north and south, but never mentioned east. And the Persians never did go east. Most of us would think of the Persians as being east, huh? East of them, Pakistan, India, and China, and very, very rich areas. Alexander went to India. The Greek crossed all of the territory of the Medes and the Persians. He went to India. The Medes and the Persians right next to them, they never went to India. Is the prophecy accurate? I bet it is. Okay? Let's go on a little bit more. And he did as he pleased, and he magnified himself. And so while I was watching, behold, a male goat was coming from the direction west. Where did Greece come from? As far as Persia is concerned. The west. Over the surface of the whole ground without touching the ground. How would we describe it today? He's flying, meaning he is going very rapidly. Everything you read about Alexander is that Alexander was like lightning. He struck and he moved. He struck and he moved. He struck and he moved. This is their analogy. It's a goat whose feet never touched the ground, just bouncing over, traveling at great length, great speed. Okay? And he had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. meaning the type of goat is what we would call a, again, unicorn.